have a couple pieces of Episcopal trivia for you. The first is that our collect today starts out with, "Stir up your power, O Lord." And that particular, there's a different collect written for each Sunday of the liturgical year. So this is the one for the third Sunday of Advent. We read it every year on the third Sunday. But before the new prayer book, when they redid the lectionary, this collect came earlier in the year. It came, I think, sometime in November. I should look it up. But it came quite a bit earlier. And it was known as, when you heard it, it was called Stir Up Sunday. Because you heard that collect, and then you remembered to go home and mix up your fruitcake and stir it up so that it had time to ferment or do whatever it had to do, soaked in that whatever, so that you were ready for your fruitcake for Christmas. And now it's too darn late. You can go home and stir something up, but it won't be fruitcake. So Chris Likens said maybe that was strategic on the part of the lectionary makers. Like, there's too much fruitcake in this world already. We have enough doorstops, whatever. But so the second piece of Episcopal trivia, and it's not just the Episcopal Church, is that on the third Sunday of Advent, we light the pink candle, right? The rose candle. And it's known as Gaudete Sunday. That's one of its names. And Gaudete means rejoice. And you notice our first reading from Zephaniah. Did some of you hear a little Messiah in your head? Rejoice, rejoice, rejoice greatly. Right? And then the the canticle that we had instead of a psalm had a lot of rejoicing in it. Cry aloud, inhabitants of Zion, ring out your joy. And therefore you shall draw water with rejoicing from the springs of salvation. And then the epistle, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. One of the wonderful, most hopeful, most cheerful bits of Scripture. It's just lovely. And there are many songs set to that. And then, and also in that Philippians reading, it says, let your gentleness be known to everyone, right? So then the next reading we get is John the Baptist not being so gentle. It's John the Baptizer saying, you brood of vipers. And just once I would think maybe it would be fun to start a sermon that way. You think I'd get very far? Just come right out and say, you brood of vipers. Especially you, or whatever. I wasn't looking who I was pointing to. Who was it? You're going to own it. It was Mike. Yeah, we all knew that. So sometimes when I am preparing to preach, I like to look at different translations of a passage and just kind of see how different people translate it. And this time I looked at The Message by Eugene Peterson. Now, it's not really a translation, it's a paraphrase. And Eugene Peterson's aim, I think, was to put the Bible in everyday language for modern people. So he takes some liberties, especially in some places rather than the others. But when I read this, it just actually made me laugh. This is what he says. When crowds of people came out for baptism because it was the popular thing to do, John exploded. Brood of snakes, what do you think you're doing slithering down here to the river? It's just such an image, don't you just get a little picture in your head? Do you think a little water on your snake skins is going to deflect God's judgment? It's your life that must change, not your skin. And he goes on. It's pretty good. So there's John being kind of fierce. And reminding us that every tree that does not bear good fruit is going to be cut down and burned, thrown into the fire. And then he says that when Jesus comes, because they say, well, are you the Messiah? He says, no, the Messiah is coming. And when the Messiah comes, he will have his winnowing fork in his hand. He will clear the threshing floor. And the wheat he will save, and the chaff is going to be burned in the unquenchable fire. And the next line is, so with many other exhortations, he proclaimed the good news to the people. Okay, that's the good news. Do we want to even hear the bad news? after all that rejoicing, we have this fun to play with here with John. So a couple of things. First, I love that John gives very practical advice in the midst of all that. And they listen to him and they say, well then, what should we do? And then he tells them things. And they're things that we can do, right? He says, if you have an extra coat, give it to someone who needs it. If you have more food than you need, share it with others who need food. It's like, okay, I can do that. I do that, right? And then the tax collectors ask. He says, don't cheat people. Don't take more than they are owed, than they have to give. Don't demand more. And with the soldiers, don't be a bully. Be fair. Don't extort. Don't use your power to take advantage of other people, basically. Well, that's all really good advice. And like, okay, that's pretty good. Is that enough to make sure that we're going to be the wheat and we're not going to be the chaff thrown into the unquenchable fire? If so, that is good news, right? So there's another way to think about that wheat and chaff. And I like to think about it this way, that it's not a matter of some of us are wheat and some of us are chaff. It's a matter of we all have wheat and we all have chaff. That we all carry around things that we would be better off if we were able to turn them over to Jesus and have him throw them in the unquenchable fire, and we didn't have to have them anymore. And I can think of some things like that for me. So for me, there are things that I carry around that prevent me from loving others fully, or maybe prevent me from loving myself fully. There are things I carry around that I just wish I could give up. And maybe this is the moment to say, yeah, let me work on that. My inability to follow through sometimes, all the amazing things I think up in my head and how that will make so many people happy, and then I actually never do them. Maybe I could take that and throw it off into the fire. That would be really helpful. The grudges that I might carry, the things that I can be really stubborn, and I can hold them and I can hold on to them, even though I know they're not hurting the other person at all for me to hold on to them. The other person probably has no clue that I'm holding on to that. They probably don't even know. And if they did, they probably don't care. And the only person it's hurting is me, because I'm carrying it. Maybe I'm avoiding certain situations because I'm mad at somebody, whatever. Maybe if I could just let go and take that, put it on the fire, wouldn't that be amazing? That would be really good news for me. It's kind of like when you take rat poisoning and hope the other person will die, right? It doesn't work that way. It's only me that it's hurting. And there are so many things that I carry, so many decisions that I want to make or can't make, or all kinds of things that if I go through my life and say, well, is that wheat or is that chaff? And if it's chaff, I can give that away. I can give that. So many of us are in a point of our life where we're trying to get rid of things, right? There is so much stuff that I have, and I work hard at what do you call it? Purging, right? Yep, and that feels really good. I've been doing that lately, and it feels really good. So what in my life needs to be purged? And I think that's the message that I want to take from this third Sunday of Advent. That when we approach Christmas and we get to that wonderful, joyful time when we celebrate the birth of Jesus, born in the stable and placed in the manger and all that beauty and the carols and all of that, that we come, as the carol says, let every heart prepare him room. So what am I going to take out to make a little room? What am I going to get out of my life to make sure there's room once again to welcome Jesus on Christmas?